I never told my daughter about my $40,000 monthly salary, even though she always saw me living a modest, almost humble life. One day, she invited me to dinner with her husband's parents, who were visiting from abroad. I decided to see how they would treat a woman who appeared poor by pretending to be a broke, naive mother. But the moment I stepped through that restaurant door, everything changed. What happened that night shattered my daughter's in-laws in ways I never saw coming. And believe me, they deserved every second of it. Let me tell you how it began. Let me tell you who I really am. Because my daughter, Clara, 35 years old, never knew the truth about her mother. To her, I was just the woman who left for work early every morning, who came home late and tired, who cooked whatever was left in the fridge. Just another employee, maybe an assistant, someone ordinary. And I never corrected her. I never told her that I earned $40,000 every month, that I'd been a senior executive at a multinational corporation for almost 2 decades, signing contracts worth millions and making decisions that shaped thousands of lives. Why tell her? Money was never a trophy to me. I grew up in an era where dignity was quiet and pride was private, so I guarded my truth. I lived in the same modest apartment for years, carried the same old leather handbag until it frayed, wore practical clothes, cooked at home, saved relentlessly, invested wisely, and became rich in silence. Because true power doesn't announce itself, it watches. And I was watching when Clara called me that Tuesday afternoon. Her voice sounded anxious, like when she was little and had broken something precious. "Mom," she began, "I need a favor. Ethan's parents are visiting from overseas. It's their first time here. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday. Please come." Something in her tone unsettled me. It wasn't a daughter inviting her mother. It was someone hoping I wouldn't embarrass her. I asked calmly, "Do they know anything about me?" There was a silence. Then she stammered, "I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple. You don't have much." There it was, the word simple. As if my life, my story, everything I'd fought for could be reduced to that single pitiful adjective. I took a slow, deep breath. "Okay, Clara," I said softly, "I'll be there." When I hung up, I looked around my living room. The old but comfortable sofa, the plain walls, the small TV, the faint smell of coffee that always lingered. Nothing that would impress anyone. And in that moment, I made a decision. If my daughter thought I was poor, if her husband's family came ready to judge, then I'd give them exactly what they expected to see. I would play the role of the poor, unrefined woman, a struggling single mother. I wanted to see their true faces because I had a feeling about them, something cold, polished, and fake. And my instincts never fail. Saturday came. I dressed in the most pitiful outfit I owned, a faded gray dress that hung shapelessly, the kind sold at thrift stores. Worn shoes, no jewelry, not even a watch. I tied my hair back in a careless bun and looked in the mirror. A woman who looked invisible stared back. Perfect. I took a taxi to the restaurant, a high-end place where the menus had no prices and the tableware probably cost more than the meal. As we drove, I felt something between sadness and anticipation. Sadness because a part of me still hoped I was wrong, that they'd treat me with kindness. Anticipation because another part of me knew I wasn't. The taxi stopped in front of the glowing facade. A doorman in white gloves opened the door for me. I paid, stepped out, took a breath, and walked inside. And there they were. Clara stood beside a long table by the window in a cream-colored dress, her hair sleek and her makeup perfect. She looked beautiful, but uneasy. Ethan was next to her, handsome and polite, but tense. And across from them sat his parents, people who looked like they'd walked straight out of a luxury magazine. His mother, Veronica, wore an emerald green dress sparkling with sequins. Diamonds flashed on her neck, wrists, and fingers. Her beauty was the kind that came with arrogance. His father, Franklin, wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, a golden watch gleaming on his wrist. They looked at me like I'd wandered into the wrong restaurant. Clara's eyes darted toward me, then widened, panic flickering across her face. "Mom, you came," she said tightly. "Of course, dear," I answered softly, giving her a small, nervous smile. Ethan kissed my cheek politely, his expression polite but strained. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "it's good to see you." And then came the introductions. "Mom, Dad," Clara began hesitantly. "This is my mother, Serafina Sterling." Veronica studied me from head to toe, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She extended a limp hand. "A pleasure," she said, her tones suggesting the opposite. Franklin followed, his handshake quick and dismissive. I sat at the far end of the table, where no one offered to pull out my chair. The waiter brought the menus, thick and heavy, written mostly in French. I pretended to frown in confusion. Veronica noticed. "Do you need help, dear?" she asked, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, please," I said quietly. "I don't know what these mean." She sighed, the kind of sigh reserved for the uneducated. "We'll order for you, something simple." "Something that doesn't cost too much," Franklin added casually. I smiled faintly. "Thank you." Veronica began chatting about their flight, their hotel suite, only $1,000 a night, but it's worth it, and their shopping spree. "We bought a few things," she said with affected modesty. "Nothing extravagant, just a few $1,000 worth." She looked at me after every sentence, waiting for admiration. "How lovely," I said. She smiled. "We've always been smart with money. Franklin runs several businesses. I oversee our investments." Her chin tilted upward. "And you? What do you do exactly?" "I work in an office," I said softly. "Mostly paperwork, filing, little things." Veronica exchanged a glance with Franklin. "Ah, administrative work. That's respectable, honest." "Yes," I said, "honest." When the food arrived, Veronica announced, "This steak is $80, but it's worth every cent. You can't just eat anywhere, can you?" "Of course not," I replied mildly. "Quality is important." Clara avoided my eyes. Ethan sipped his wine, silent. Then Veronica leaned forward, all false sympathy. "You live alone, don't you, Serafina?" "Yes." "That must be difficult, at your age, without much support, and with a small salary, I imagine things can get tight?" I smiled faintly. "I manage." Veronica sighed dramatically. "Oh, I admire women who struggle. Truly, it's brave to survive with so little. Although, of course, we all want to give our children more than we had." It was a subtle dagger, wrapped in silk. I smiled again. "You're right. Everyone gives what they can." Veronica smiled, proud and venomous. "Exactly. We always made sure Ethan and Clara had the best. Private schools, travel, languages, everything. And when they got married, well, we helped, of course. The down payment for their home, the honeymoon in Europe. You know how it is when parents want to see their children happy." She sipped her wine delicately, then turned to me. "And you, Serafina? Were you able to help Clara when she got married?" The question floated in the air like a razor wrapped in lace. "Not much," I said simply. "I gave them what I could, a small gift." Veronica's smile deepened, triumphant. "How sweet. Every bit counts, right? The amount doesn't matter, just the thought." But her tone said exactly the opposite. I felt the chill of rage forming, not the loud kind, but the quiet, disciplined fury that brews beneath calm waters. I breathed evenly, kept my smile soft, and let her keep talking. People like her always did. The waiter brought dessert, tiny pieces of edible art priced higher than an average family's groceries. Veronica ordered the most expensive one. "This is divine," she said. "It even has edible gold flakes, a small detail only the finest restaurants offer." I nodded politely. "It looks beautiful." She took another bite. "You know, Serafina, I think we should discuss something important, family to family." Clara froze. Ethan's fork stopped midair. Veronica clasped her hands together and put on her most diplomatic smile. "We love Clara very much. She's everything to us. And Ethan, well, he's the kindest husband she could have chosen. But as parents, we naturally worry. We want their life to be stable." "Stable?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said smoothly. "Financially, emotionally. We've helped a great deal, and will continue to, but we also think it's important that Ethan doesn't carry unnecessary burdens." Her words landed like stones on porcelain. Burdens, I repeated, my tone still soft. Veronica smiled sweetly, as if explaining something to a child. I don't mean to offend, of course, but at your age, living alone, with a limited income, it's only natural that Clara and Ethan might worry about you. That's what good children do, after all. We just don't want that worry to become a strain. Her words landed like stones on porcelain. Burdens? I repeated, my tone still soft. Veronica smiled sweetly, as if explaining something to a child. I don't mean to offend, of course, but at your age, living alone, with a limited income, it's only natural that Clara and Ethan might worry about you. That's what good children do, after all. We just don't want that worry to become a strain. I placed my spoon gently on the table. I understand perfectly. Good, she said, relieved, because Franklin and I have been talking. We'd like to help you, financially, that is. Give you a small monthly allowance, something modest, of course, but enough to make life more comfortable. And in return, we'd simply ask that you allow Clara and Ethan the space they need as a couple to live their own life without obligations. It was an offer disguised as kindness, but I knew what it really was, a bribe to disappear. Ethan looked horrified. Mother! Ethan, please, Veronica interrupted. We're all adults here. I lifted my water glass, took a calm sip, and set it down. Then I looked straight at her. That's very generous of you, Veronica, truly. She smiled, victorious. I'm glad you see it that way. But tell me, I said gently, how much exactly were you thinking for this allowance? Veronica blinked. Well, we thought around $500, maybe $700 if needed. I nodded slowly. $700 a month for me to disappear from my daughter's life? Her eyes widened. That's not what I meant. But that's exactly what you said, I replied calmly. She shifted in her seat, flustered. We just want to help. Of course, I said. Help, like you helped them with their house. How much was that again? $40,000, she said, proud, and $15,000 for their honeymoon. I smiled faintly. So $55,000 in total. That's quite an investment. Tell me, Veronica, has it brought you any return? Respect, perhaps? Love? Or just obedience? Her smile vanished. Excuse me? I leaned forward slightly. You've been talking all night about money, how much things cost, what you've spent, what you own, but you haven't once asked how I'm doing, not once. You've measured my worth in dollars, and apparently I'm worth $700 a month. Her jaw tightened. That's unfair. No, I said softly, it's the truth. Franklin cleared his throat. I think you're misunderstanding. I understand perfectly, I cut him off. You both wanted to buy me off, to erase the poor mother who doesn't fit into your polished world. But here's what you don't understand. Not everything, and not everyone, has a price. Veronica's painted lips trembled slightly. You're being very rude. I smiled. And you've been very polite, on the surface. But cruelty wrapped in manners is still cruelty. The table went silent. Even the clinking of cutlery around us seemed to fade. I placed my napkin on the table and looked at her directly. You said you admire women who struggle. Tell me, have you ever had to struggle alone? I have my achievements, she replied defensively. I manage our investments, our properties. Properties your husband bought, I interrupted gently. Investments made with money that already existed. That's not the same as creating something from nothing, is it? Her face flushed. I don't know where you're going with this, Serafina. Then let me show you. I took a deep breath. 40 years ago, I was 23. I worked as a secretary in a small firm. I earned barely enough to eat. I lived in a rented room. And then, one day, I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My family turned their backs on me. I was alone, completely alone. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had never heard this part of my story. I worked until the day before I gave birth. 2 weeks later, I went back to work. I left my baby with a neighbor because I couldn't afford daycare. I studied at night. I learned English at the library. I learned accounting, management, finance. I climbed step by step. Assistant, coordinator, manager, director. 20 years of sacrifice, exhaustion, and persistence. Veronica was silent. And do you know what I earn now? I asked quietly. She shook her head. $40,000 a month for nearly 20 years. The silence was absolute. Ethan looked stunned. Clara's hand trembled on her glass. Franklin stared at me, unblinking. I'm the regional director of operations at a multinational corporation, I continued. I oversee 5 countries. I sign contracts worth millions. I manage thousands of people. And I do it well. Clara whispered. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? Because you didn't need to know, I said gently. I wanted you to value effort, not privilege. I wanted you to grow up with empathy, not entitlement. Veronica blinked rapidly, as if trying to make sense of what she just heard. That's impossible. If you earned that much, why would you live like this? Because, I said with a small smile, I don't need to prove anything. I don't need validation. Real wealth isn't loud. It's quiet. I looked her straight in the eye, and that's why I came tonight looking poor, to see how you would treat someone you thought had nothing. Now I know. Veronica's cheeks flushed crimson. This is absurd. Franklin interjected coldly. Even if that's true, you still deceived us. Maybe, I said, but my deception revealed your truth. For a long moment, no one said anything. The waiter approached cautiously, ready to ask about dessert, then froze, sensing the tension, and quietly backed away. I looked at Veronica and Franklin, 2 people who had mistaken polish for class and wealth for worth. You see, I said softly, I wanted to know how much value you place on a human being without knowing her title, her money, or her power. And tonight, you've given me a very clear answer. Veronica swallowed hard. Her confidence was unraveling thread by thread. Serafina, please, she said, forcing a trembling smile. There's no need for drama. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. There was no wrong foot, I said evenly. You stepped exactly where you wanted to, on my dignity. Franklin tried to recover control of the table. Let's calm down, he said sternly. We all made mistakes. Let's just move forward. I turned to him. That's easy to say when you've never been looked down upon for your clothes, your accent, or your supposed place in the world. He cleared his throat. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said quietly, and that's all right. People like you always mean it, even when they pretend they don't. Then I turned to my daughter. Clara sat motionless, her eyes full of shame and disbelief. Mom, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I reached for her hand gently. No, my love, you didn't know because I never taught you to look for cruelty behind courtesy. That's my mistake. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was embarrassed, she admitted. I didn't want them to think less of me. I smiled faintly. Then let this be a lesson. Anyone who judges you by what your mother earns or how she dresses doesn't deserve your respect. Ethan spoke up for the first time, his voice quiet but steady. Mrs. Sterling, I'm so sorry. My parents can be... He stopped himself. They were wrong. I nodded. Apology accepted, but not for me, for your wife. She deserves better than to be caught between 2 worlds that think money defines worth. Veronica shifted in her seat, trying to salvage dignity. Well, I suppose we've all learned something tonight. Yes, I said, standing up slowly. Some of us learned the cost of arrogance. I took my small purse and turned to the waiter. Could I please have the check? Franklin blinked. Oh, there's no need. We invited. I cut him off with a calm smile. No, tonight I'll pay. He frowned. That's not necessary. It is, I said simply. When the bill arrived, Veronica leaned forward, still defensive. You do realize this place isn't cheap, don't you? I looked at the total, $980. Without hesitation, I pulled out my black card and placed it on the tray. The waiter's eyebrows lifted slightly. He recognized the card type immediately. Veronica's eyes widened. Franklin's jaw tensed. The waiter returned with the receipt. Thank you, Miss Sturley, he said respectfully. Would you like me to send the invoice to your company as usual? Veronica blinked, confused. Your company? Yes, I said, signing the slip. Sterling Global Operations. I own it. Franklin stared. You own it? I smiled. I built it from scratch. No one spoke. Even the sound of glasses clinking from nearby tables seemed distant now. I slipped my card back into my purse and turned to them one last time. Thank you for dinner. It was enlightening. Then I looked at my daughter. Clara, my dear, I'll call you tomorrow. She stood up too quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. Mom, wait, please don't leave like this. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not angry, just disappointed, for both of us. You'll be fine. You just need to remember who you are and where you come from. She nodded, tears falling silently. I love you. I know, I whispered, kissing her forehead. That's why this hurts less than it could have. And with that, I walked out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit my face like a quiet blessing. Outside, the city lights shimmered, thousands of people rushing, dreaming, pretending. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. I had spent years hiding my success because I believed humility protected me from pride. But that night, I realized something else. Sometimes silence doesn't protect you. It only gives others permission to misjudge you. And I had no intention of being misjudged ever again. My phone buzzed early. Clara. I hesitated before answering. Mom? Her voice was soft, trembling. Yes, sweetheart. I told Ethan everything, about what you went through, about how you built everything. He cried, Mom. He said he'd never been prouder to call you family. A tear slipped down my own cheek before I could stop it. That means a lot. And his parents, she hesitated, they want to apologize. I chuckled softly. Let them keep their apology. I don't need it. But they said, Clara, I interrupted gently, forgiveness doesn't always mean giving people another chance to hurt you. Sometimes it means walking away in peace. There was silence. Then she whispered, You're right. I love you, Clara. Always remember, your value doesn't depend on what others see. It comes from what you know about yourself. I will, Mom, she said, her voice steady now. And I'll make sure no one ever makes you feel small again. I smiled. That's my girl. When the call ended, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The city below moved with its usual rhythm. Cars, crowds, the endless pulse of ambition. I took a sip and let the warmth fill me. That dinner hadn't been a humiliation. It had been liberation. Because for the first time in years, I hadn't hidden who I was. Not from strangers, not from my daughter, not even from myself. And as the morning sun climbed higher, one truth became clear. Power doesn't need to shout, it only needs to stand. And I was standing. Always had been, always would be. 3 months passed since that dinner. The memory of Veronica's frozen smile had faded, but the lesson hadn't. Saracina had buried herself back in her work, the kind of work that demanded 12-hour days and decisions that rippled across continents. Her company, Sterling Global Operations, was preparing to finalize one of the biggest partnerships of the year, a joint venture with a real estate and logistics conglomerate based overseas. Ironically, the company's local representative was a familiar name, the Langford Group. When her assistant mentioned it, Serafina almost smiled. Langford, Veronica's last name. Of course. The universe had an impeccable sense of timing. The morning of the meeting, Serafina arrived early at the boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in silver light, the skyline glimmering beneath a soft winter haze. She wore a navy suit, crisp and understated, her hair in a sleek twist. No jewelry, no perfume, only quiet confidence. She was reviewing the contract when her assistant peeked in. Ma'am, the representatives from Langford Group are here. Send them in, she said calmly. The door opened, and there they were. Veronica and Franklin Langford, impeccably dressed, polished, but with a flicker of unease in their eyes. They didn't recognize her at first. Veronica extended her hand. Good morning. I'm Veronica Langford, Executive Director of... Then her voice faltered. Her eyes widened. Her flawless smile cracked. Serafina? Serafina rose slowly, meeting her gaze. Mrs. Langford, Mr. Langford. Her voice was calm, steady, the same tone she used when approving million-dollar deals. Please, have a seat. For a moment, no one moved. Then Franklin cleared his throat awkwardly. I didn't realize you were involved in this project. Oh, Serafina said with a faint, polite smile. I'm not involved. I'm in charge. Veronica's face turned a shade paler. The meeting began. Numbers, projections, strategic partnerships. Serafina spoke with precision, every word measured, every silence intentional. The Langfords tried to keep up, but their composure faltered with every slide, every question they couldn't answer cleanly. Finally, she closed the folder in front of her. "Your proposal," she said, "is promising, but it lacks transparency. Several line items are ambiguous, especially these subcontracting costs." Franklin shifted uncomfortably. "Those are standard." "They're inflated," she interrupted gently, "by almost 15%. I don't approve sloppy math, Mr. Langford, or intentional misdirection." A bead of sweat formed on his temple. Veronica jumped in, voice too bright. "Surely we can discuss this privately, woman to woman." Serafina looked at her evenly. "We are in a professional setting, Mrs. Langford. There's no need to reduce it to gender or sympathy." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. After the presentation ended, Serafina stood. "I'll take the day to review your documents. You'll receive our decision tomorrow." Franklin nodded quickly. "Of course, we appreciate your time." As they gathered their papers, Veronica hesitated. Then she turned toward Serafina. "May I speak to you alone?" Serafina gestured toward the window. 5 minutes. When the door closed, Veronica let out a shaky breath. "I owe you an apology." "You already gave me one," Serafina replied coolly. "Over dinner. It was wrapped in politeness and arrogance." Veronica winced. "You were right. That night, I behaved horribly. I judged you without knowing who you were." "You judged me because you thought you knew who I was," Serafina corrected softly. Veronica looked away. "It's strange. When I saw you again just now, sitting there, I felt small, for the first time in years." "That's not my intention," Serafina said. "Power isn't meant to humiliate, only to reveal." Veronica's voice cracked. "And what does this reveal?" "That sometimes," Serafina said quietly, "life brings people back to the same table, not to seek revenge, but to test whether they've learned." Veronica's eyes glistened. "And if they haven't, then life keeps teaching." Veronica nodded slowly. "You could destroy us with one signature." "I could," Serafina said truthfully, "but that wouldn't make me better. It would just make me like you were that night." A tear slipped down Veronica's cheek. "I deserved that." "Maybe," Serafina said gently, "but redemption starts with awareness, not shame." For the first time, Veronica seemed genuinely humbled. "You've built something extraordinary, Serafina. I used to think class came from what we own. You've shown me it comes from how we stand." Serafina gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness, not approval, but recognition. "You'll hear from my office tomorrow," she said, turning back to her desk. "I suggest revising your proposal honestly this time." Veronica hesitated. "And if we do?" "Then I'll consider it. Not because of who you are, but because of what you've learned." That night, as the city lights shimmered outside her office window, Serafina sat alone with a cup of tea. The skyline stretched endlessly, a mosaic of ambition and regret. She thought of Clara, of how far both of them had come, and of how easy it was for people to forget the quiet ones who built the foundations others stood on. Her phone buzzed, a message from Clara. "Ethan told me his parents might be doing business with your firm. Is it true?" Serafina smiled faintly. "It was true, but it's just business now. Don't worry." Another message followed after a pause. "Mom, they're different now. I think that night changed them." Serafina typed back slowly. "Good. Sometimes the best lessons don't come from punishment. They come from perspective." She put the phone down, leaned back, and let the silence of the city surround her. The next morning, the Langford proposal was delivered again, cleaner, simpler, transparent. Serafina read it carefully. It was good, honest even. She signed it. Not as revenge, but as acknowledgement that people could change when forced to see the mirror clearly enough. When the pen lifted from the paper, she smiled. Power, after all, wasn't about dominance. It was about grace under control. And in that moment, Serafina realized that her greatest victory wasn't in exposing anyone's arrogance. It was in mastering her own mercy.